Just a quick heads up that these are adults having adult conversations about things that take place on a show where the adults use a lot of adult language. All this to say there might be some salty language ahead, so please plan accordingly.
Everything okay?
Yes, Ted. Everything is okay.
What is it? What'd I do?
What are you talking about?
Oh, come on, man. You're mad as hell, man. I just want to know why. Huh? What have I got to learn here?
You want to know what you did?
Yeah, please.
Okay, I'll tell you what you did. You made me feel like I was the most important person in the whole world. And then you abandoned me. Like you switched out a light just like that. And I worked my ass off trying to get your attention back, to prove myself to you, to make you like me again. But the more I did, the less you cared. It's like I was fucking invisible.
What would Ted Lasso do? That's the question we explore in each episode of this podcast. We take the lessons we learned from Ted Lasso and apply them to the real world through the lens of leadership and positive psychology. My name is Dimple Dabalia.
And I'm Jeff Harry. We hope you enjoy this episode as much as we enjoyed making it, and that it helps you discover your own lasso way and embrace what it means to believe.
Welcome back, everyone. Welcome to What Would Ted Lasso Do? This week, we are finally at our last episode of season 2, episode 12, Inverting the Pyramid of Success. And this one was written by Jason Sudeikis and Joe Kelly and directed by Declan Lowney. I'm excited to finally talk about this.
Yeah. I'm also excited because I'm finally caught up. We're finally have now are at the same level. So I could even do research today and go into the Googles and ask questions because I was like, I didn't have to worry about spoilers. So.
Oh, nice. All right. So let's see what you bring today with the research. I'm really interested to hear. Yeah, this episode was, just once again, such a powerful ending, packed with so much stuff. So where should we start?
Let's start from, the very beginning. I was really amazed because I'm so nervous, right? Ted has just, for everyone, we're just catching people up, right? Ted just found out that now he, was in all of the papers about his panic attack, and it's popping up on all the news feeds, and he's getting notifications about it. And he seems relaxed, in my opinion. He seemed pretty calm about it. And then he gets the text from his wife or his ex-wife, and it was almost like, oh, wow, that's really nice. And then he, does a gesture of reminding them of how they used to be, where he would tell his knock-knock jokes. And she's like, oh, good, you're fine. And then he wanted to speak more, and try to maybe rekindle something or just simply find out more information. And then, the 3 dots, he got the 3 dots. And then he was like, okay, I will respect your boundaries again. So there's a certain level of growth there that you saw all through that one text. But for the most part, I was surprised because he seemed pretty okay with it that morning as he has his one bowl of whatever that was, breakfast.
Yeah. For someone who has just been outed for panic attacks, he was pretty calm. And I think that goes to show the work that he's done with Dr. Sharon, right? It seems like there's probably a little bit of him bringing that in. But yeah, in that 2-minute span where he sits down to eat, he gets the text from Rebecca saying fuck the haters and that she's there for him. She gets that voice note from Sharon reminding him that the truth will set you free, but first it'll piss you off. And then the text from Michelle Lasso.
What's also interesting is it's also a callback to different episodes and different seasons, right? Because the Fuck the Haters was when they were burning that stuff. And then Sharon was earlier this season. So I found that also fascinating, that there was a lot of full circle moments that were happening in this episode.
Yeah, there were quite a few. I don't know, for some reason, like there was like a really interesting shot. Like you see him after he finishes his text with Michelle, he puts the phone down, and for just a split second, you see like Trent Krim and the newspaper and the headline, and then you see the phone with his picture of his son on it, and then on the other side of it, you see Ted's like face, like this angry look, or or maybe it was in the midst of his panic attack. And like I feel like nothing is ever just a giveaway on this show, and so I'm not sure like what they were trying to show there, but it really struck me because it was, you saw all three of those images, and so maybe it was how this is impacting Ted, which is impacting his son, or I don't know, but it just caught my attention for some reason.
No, but as he's walking out, it seems as if everyone had a bigger issue with it than he did, right? And I think this also reminds me of like social media posts when you, like, let's say you post something vulnerable and you post it, and you kind of post it because you've processed it. But then when you post it, then all of a sudden people start reaching out to you and you're like, I'm fine. Like, I'm good now. But they're like, do you need anything? What do you need? And I kind of felt like it was like that for people, where they were like, they almost felt as if he was still having the panic attack at that very time. So as he's walking down and someone's like, how are you doing? He's like, I'm good. And he's like, are you sure? Like, there's so much of that. Are you sure? Because a lot of people don't understand what a panic attack is, right? And how you would actually support someone around it.
Yeah, and we'll talk about his press conference later, but he makes the comment in that about, like how we handle this. And he talked about it in the context of sports, but I think mental health in general, right? Like the way that in this day and age where there's more discussion about it than ever, there's still such a stigma associated with any kind of mental health issue.
Yeah.
And talking about it, and it makes people uncomfortable. We talked about grief a couple of episodes ago, and same thing, like grief makes people really, really uncomfortable, and people don't know how to deal with it. And I think mental health issues in general are the same way. And so when you have someone and to be outed this way, like that's just really, it's not great.
And to think, if I was to think of a lot of sports, if a coach walked off the field and they found out later on, whether that was soccer or basketball or football, they probably let that guy go, like now, which is really messed up. But like,
yeah.
And I think of the people that have advocated for mental health, like Simone Biles and Naomi Osaka, where they just are like, I'm just going to walk off, or I just won't compete. I have a lot of respect for them, because they're basically being like, you're not going to control me and force me to do something that's like dangerous to be out here.
Yeah.
And then people try to guilt them into still being on the floor because they want to make money off these athletes. And then they call them out by being like, this is the problem with sports right now.
Yeah.
And I love that. I love that movement started by them.
Yeah, definitely. I think so too. And it's super brave for sure. Yeah, and then we see Beard waiting for him. I want to say the song that's playing as Ted's walking out is Yesterday's Papers by the Rolling Stones, which is a great song. And that's exactly what it is. Yesterday's papers, today's papers. So Beard in this episode, once again, like you just see those moments of his loyalty and friendship and love, like he loves this guy. And the fact that he's just like, yeah, I don't know what any of this is about, even though like he's got the paper in his back pocket when he stands up to walk away, But yeah, and then we also see like the old guy who calls Ted the wanker. Hey, wanker.
Yeah.
And so you see the initial where he's just like, kind of like berating him, but then he kind of softens and he says, "Oh, just do the job and you'll be fine." But I think that's kind of this old school mentality too, right? Like just shove it down
Yeah.
Do what you're supposed to do and like you'll be okay. And
Right.
it's like, no, like we have to talk about this. It's not just going to be okay.
I will say, though, talk about, again, full circle. You think of one of the first episodes ever. You see that dude and he's just like, you wanker, get out of here. And now he's wearing the Richmond sweater.
Yeah.
And at the same time that he's like, yeah, you're so stupid, he actually is still like, you can tell he cares more about Ted. So you can see, again, as best as this guy can be, like, I feel like even in that gesture, that probably wasn't good advice. I felt he was gesturing like, I love you. I care for you. And I'm here for you, which is like, whoa, Ted has won this guy over the span of 2 years. That's pretty amazing.
Yeah. I appreciate that. Like when he gets to work, everyone has his back,
Yeah.
Everyone is fully supportive and they just want to protect him. And everyone wants to kick the ass of whoever did this. And he keeps saying like, don't, like when he's in Rebecca's office, he's like, everything the person said is right. And so even in that moment, he's also trying to protect Nate because he knows it's Nate. But it was nice to see like just the total support and that there was no like, oh, that, but Rebecca already knew that he has panic attacks and she didn't hold that against him from the beginning. Higgins knew because he was in the room, right?
Yeah.
And so the only person who wouldn't have known is Keeley.
Yeah.
But even she, just took it in stride. But I think also there's a generational thing there too. I think, like she's of a younger generation where these kinds of things, like you do talk about them and they are starting to be a little bit more normalized that it's okay.
And I almost feel like Keeley also knows press so well.
Yeah.
Because she later on deflects it and she's just like, we'll just roll with this. Right.
Yeah.
I've seen much worse stuff that I've had to clean up. And this is not bad. This is whatever this is. I will say, though, man, when Beard gets to the office, I am as pissed off as Beard. I am like livid like Beard because I'm like, when he like goes up to Nate and is like, so Nate, you want to talk about something? Oh, my goodness. The awkwardness.
Yeah.
The awkwardness. I thought Roy would have been more angry, but I guess he was distracted by other things. But like, oh, the awkwardness.
Roy's dealing with his own stuff.
Roy has his own issues going on. But like, I would have thought the Diamond Dogs would have like spent some time figuring it out. But because it was obvious they were the only people in the room.
Right.
So, but they did it. And I was not surprised that Ted protected Nate. Yeah. And I thought that was really great how the whole, core team supported him.
Yeah. So I know we're kind of going to jump a little bit and I think that's okay. But, when you have Ted and Beard at the pub and Beard is asking like, are you going to say anything?
Yeah.
And Ted's position is no, like, in these situations, you have to let people come to you to apologize. And the difference here, though, is that like Beard already knows that Nate's not Nate anymore. He's not going to come and apologize. Yeah.
Yeah. Nate is done.
And Beard is concerned, right? That if you just keep this in, like it's going to impact your health.
Yeah.
And I like that he says, I'm afraid your mustache is going to pop off. I thought that was kind of funny.
Yeah.
But so this idea that like, we give people the opportunity. And so then we see Ted gives the opportunity a couple of times, does anyone want to talk about anything?
Yeah.
Anyone want to share anything? And then we get Roy's confession, which we can get to in a bit. But even then, Nate says nothing about this. I think there's two parts to this. Like on the one hand, yes, like I think it's good to give people agency, give them an opportunity to recognize that, hey, I screwed up. Let me take accountability and go and apologize and whatnot. But on the flip side, especially again, when you come to these kinds of situations where like we know that there's this young leader, he's lost right now. We talked about this last time that he's kind of doubling down now out of fear, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so he's not going to be in a mental place to understand, I don't think, that he can't see it right now. Like he's so in it, and the stories that he's woven around this are so big that he can't see that he's done something, or he knows he's done something wrong, but he can't see why he needs to be the one to apologize. Like he's the victim in this is his perspective, you know?
Yeah.
And so there's an element of, you know, leaders who have been there longer taking that opportunity to step up to confront the person, you know, to figure out what happened. And we see that come later, which we'll get to later when we talk more about Nate. But I think in this case, Ted doesn't have all the information to understand that either, you know?
I think there's so many other things he's been dealing with that he hasn't seen what the evolution that was happening that Beard has seen, right? But there's also that idea of look at what his strategy was with Jamie Tart and heck, even Roy. Like he took his time and they came around at their own time, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think he thought that would be the same strategy. Just drop these, you know, little pills, and they'll grow or manifest into something else. I don't think he realized how bad it had gotten. But yeah, my anger was reflected so much in Beard because I was livid.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because that could destroy the team, dude. Like there's no benefit. There's really no, like, it's not even very strategic because what's the best thing that's going to happen? Ted gets fired and then Nate takes over. Like, what was his strategy? Like, it's such a childish move of someone that just is like wants to complain, and such a breaking of trust because they all shared something vulnerable in there. You don't think like Ted could have said stuff about Nate, but like that was the trust that was broken. And I'm surprised that Diamond Dogs didn't talk about that.
Yeah, I'm kind of surprised they didn't either. But I think the breaking of the trust goes both ways. So that was the breaking of the trust by Nate. But for him, the trust with Ted had already been broken over the course of the season. And again, it could be perception and not reality, but like perception is what people act on a lot of times. It's so important to remember like the way that we interact with people, the way that we treat people, their perception of that. If we're not like checking in, we're not having that communication, like it could blow up this way. And so, yeah. And so, but I agree. Like, I think it was surprising that even if they came together without Ted, that they wouldn't have come together. And Beard's anger, you know, again, because Beard has been seeing what Nate has been doing all season, it's even more so. But I guess that was the other part that was a little bit surprising is that even then at that point at the pub that he didn't say anything to Ted to be like, that is like, he said that's not going to happen, but he didn't go on to explain why, you know?
What do you mean?
So like Beard said, you know, if you're waiting for Nate to come to apologize, that's not going to happen.
Oh, yeah.
But he didn't say like, you know, here's what's been happening.
Yeah.
This, you know, these last few months or whatever. And so, yeah. So I don't know. It was interesting.
Oh, I have so many feelings about Nate.
So let's move on to Sam. So Edwin Akufu has already determined that Sam is going to come to Casablanca, which I think is kind of funny. And he sends him the jersey. And so this was something that I didn't know. I knew number 10 must mean something. I didn't know what it meant. And so I did look that up and learned that traditionally number 10 is given to the team's playmaker or star attacking midfielder, and that it's something that a player must earn. And so, yeah, so the fact that he's already getting jersey number 10 and it just shows the level of like what people think about him, but he's still not convinced. And so, you know, he's still on the fence and trying to figure things out.
Well, I was also looking up Leo Messi's number for Argentina is 10 as well, and he's the playmaker. I think the vibe that we were getting, or at least I was getting from a Kufu, was not only was he already assuming stuff, but everything was almost too controlled, right? from like buying up the museum and then buying the restaurant and now buying this jersey and just assuming he's already there, leaving the helicopter on the pitch. Has the helicopter just been sitting there for the last 3 days? Like, how long has he been there? You know? So there definitely is already signs that this is like this dude gets whatever he wants, which is like what most billionaires are like. So I think that also did not help that he did it that way, because it was almost like there was an entitlement that, okay, it's just a done deal that Sam's coming.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Because who's going to turn down that offer, you know?
Right. Right. It would be insulting too. I'm telling you, I'm going to make you the playmaker of the greatest team on earth.
Yeah. And you get to come home and,
right,
you know, do all the things that you want to do. But yeah, Sam is looking for something bigger. And so he's talking to his dad, looking for the signs from the universe.
I love his dad. His dad's advice is so good all the time. It's so good because his dad could have just been like, come home.
Yeah. Yeah. But his dad's like, no, like, I'm not going to tell you, you'll know. And then he sees like that pickup game in the park and the kid with the Obisanya jersey on. Yeah, and so ultimately he turns...
Wait.
Oh.
The kid in the park with the Obasan jersey, but then he sees the other two players with the patch covering up the oil company.
Oh, I missed that.
Oh, you didn't see that?
No, I missed that.
He sees two other people.
Oh.
That's the part that is so like, watch the universe sign. So it's not just that on the back, but it's what he did on the front, and that they still have it on.
Wow.
Like 7 games later, whatever many games later.
Yeah.
So I was like, whoa, that is no joke. That is dope.
Oh, I have no idea how I missed that.
You got to watch that. That part was like,
I'm going to have to.
And then he smiles because he first was like, oh, Obisanya. Okay, that's dope.
Yeah.
But then he sees the other one and was like, oh, not only am I being recognized, but my actions are being recognized long after, because they could have pulled it off after and kept playing with, because people have I have old jerseys all the time with people, but the fact that they still were doing that is pretty awesome.
Yeah. So it just shows like the level of influence that he has had here. Oh, that's awesome. Yeah. So he makes the decision, whether it was based on that or a combination of things, turns down Okufu and Sam Richardson. Like, that whole thing just reminded me of that Led Tasso moment of just over the top, crazy.
I forgot about Led Tasso. Oh my
unnecessary.
Gosh, Led Tasso. Oh yeah.
But what I loved was Sam's reaction, because Sam's reaction was like my reaction, like, what? Like,
yeah.
Like, I don't even understand what's happening right now.
When he starts strangling the model, the model podium, and then he takes a poop on it. I'm just like, and it's so good because it's like Sam was like, well, I was concerned about whether or not I should play for you. And now those concerns have been covered. Like, I'm so glad that you're doing this.
Yeah. The handshake guy was the funniest though, with his like 1980s like psych thing, you know, 1990s
psych.
I thought that was really funny.
When did you know he was going to say no?
I kind of felt like after the whole scene in the park, even though I didn't notice the jerseys the way that you did, but I just felt like after that it was kind of like, yeah, I don't think he's going to leave.
I thought he probably already had made this decision, but when he scored the goal, and he was just like, one more, right? Because they're getting out of relegation, which means if they get out of relegation, all of a sudden now it's like a brand new chance at the league. And he may never get a chance like that again. Yeah. And then they are literally chanting the song, Richmond till we die. Well, Richmond till we die, you know, and he's like, that has to be going into his psyche.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, I'm Richmond, you know, till I die. And this dude wants me to leave tomorrow. Yeah. Even if he would, like, it's too abrupt. It's just too abrupt for him to just bounce. Because like he said, like, his story isn't over at Richmond. Yeah. He feels like he still there's no closure for him yet.
Yeah. And I think I agree, like the scene in the locker room before he walks out, like, to me, that just like was like the thing that told him like, yeah, I'm making the right decision. Like, I feel
Yes,
like he had kind of
exactly.
decided, but
Yes.
then I don't know, but I could be wrong. But then seeing like his teammates and his role in that space, like it just was like that kind of final little thing that he needed to know that, yeah, I've made the right decision, you know?
And then if he didn't know he had made the right decision, he knew as the guy was having his
like that, just like
his tantrum and being like, I will ruin you. You'll never play for the Nigerian team. It was such a good for only being in a couple episodes that whole rant part was hilarious and so good.
And so over the top.
The pooping on the mannequin was just the icing on the cake.
And so then he goes to tell Rebecca, but Ted's in Rebecca's office. And so that's like a little awkward moment because Sam doesn't know that Ted knows.
Right.
Ted now knows everything.
Right. Right. And they both want Ted to stay.
Yeah.
Why do you think they wanted Ted to stay? I didn't understand.
I mean, I think for Sam, it was more like, oh, you're already here. Don't worry about it. Like, I'll go. And I think for Rebecca, it was like, I don't know, like, I need you here so I stay strong kind of thing, maybe.
Oh,
I'm not sure.
Interesting.
But yeah, so even that, so, you know, he announces that he's staying and you just see like Rebecca's face where it's just like, you see her kind of relax into a smile and then Ted has to be the one to be like, okay, well, that's great. We're really happy to hear that.
Right.
You know, but then he goes that extra mile down.
He's got to know. I love that Ted asks him, you know, why did you decide to say? And I had to write this down. I actually went back to it and watched it this morning.
Jeff, I'm impressed. Like,
I know.
I'm so impressed.
But I was like, he goes, I wish I could say it was because of my feelings for you as he's looking at Ted, which is the best.
Yeah.
But the truth is, I think I need to stop worrying about how others feel about me. I'm staying because it's what's best for me and my personal journey. Go, Sam. Go, Sam. Let's go, Sam. Setting your boundaries, doing it for you. I love that.
Yeah. Yeah. And then I love that Ted explains that to Rebecca afterwards. I think that was for you.
Yeah. I don't know if that was for me.
And I love that Sam then bought up the pop-up restaurant and he's gonna open a Nigerian restaurant. Like, I think that's amazing.
Right.
So yeah, I'm excited to see what happens for him in this next season.
We talked about this earlier offline, but you know, just this idea of like when you step into your own, you know, you start to set boundaries and you start to expect more, right?
Yeah.
And he's just like, you know, Rebecca, you couldn't give me the time of day. So now I'm doing my own thing. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll still be here, but it's not about you. So I'm doing my, and like, go ahead with your bad self. And what's funny too, is sometimes opportunities where they're pushing you to do something else, like him being offered the Akufu opportunity, actually makes him more clear about what he wants. So even those things that you would consider either bad or whatever it is, like that roller coaster provides so much clarity. And then, you step into what is Viola Davis? Like you either claim who you are or you end up chasing your worth for the rest of your life. And I think for a while he was chasing his worth. And then Akufu offered him, hey, this is your worth. And Sam's like, no, I'm actually worthy of more than that.
Yeah.
Boom.
Yeah. And I can do it on my terms,
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I like kind of how they brought all of his storyline to a close in this. Like, this feels good. One thing I want to go back to that we kind of forgot to talk about when we were talking about Ted is his conversation with the team.
Oh, yeah.
And that's such an important piece.
So good.
Such a beautiful example of accountability as a leader.
Yeah.
And just, the way that he lays it out for them, he doesn't beat around the bush. He's just very direct. And he says, you found out something from somewhere and it should have been for me. And then the whole discussion about choices, like I just thought that was so powerful, and it's true, right? Like we make choices throughout our day, every day, and this is the problem: is we get stuck in those choices, right? So when we talk about ruminating on the past and worrying about the future, like those are often based on the choices that we've either made or that we have to make. And we don't get to redo them, but we can change, like we can learn from them and change what we're doing moving forward. And he acknowledges that he missed out on an opportunity to continue building trust with the team.
Yeah.
You know, that if he would have shared that with them, and we've talked about this, right? Like when you're a leader leading a team, like how much do you share?
Yeah.
Right. A lot of leaders would probably think like, yeah, I'm not going to share this stuff with people on my team, you know? And so I can see where Ted would come from with not necessarily telling the team that that's what happened to him, because they're looking up to him. And there's an element of, like we said, you know, like with this kind of stigma around mental health and anxiety and things like that, that, you know, is this person who's telling me that I need to do this or whatever, like, are they strong enough? Are they capable enough if they're dealing with their own stuff? But the flip side to that is they are dealing with their stuff. And so that's the lesson to be learned, I think, you know, is that they're dealing with their stuff, which is allowing them to be there for you, you know? And so, yeah, so I don't know. I thought it was really just brave and really beautiful the way he did it. And then just the team's reaction, like every single person's like, we got you.
Yep.
You know?
I mean, I loved it because he was like, me choosing not to be forthright with y'all is a bad choice, but I can't be wasting time wishing for a do-over on all that. And even if he's saying that, they're cutting to Jamie with his choice, right? They're cutting to Nate. But talk about like
and
Sam, right? Talk about a perfect example of like a perfect, in my opinion, balance of healthy masculinity and divine femininity, right? Where in divine feminine leadership of him being both vulnerable and clear and grounded and, you know, also like compassionate towards himself and towards others. And even that point when the captain's like, and then we're gonna find him and we're gonna kill him, you know, and he's like, whoa, I don't want you bringing that energy, right? Like the fact that he was even willing to do that part, that was just such a perfect display of like owning. I wish more leaders would own their responsibilities that way, right? And own when you make a mistake, right?
Exactly.
And own it in a way that's not like, because I've seen it, I'm sure you have too, where they own it, but they kind of tiptoe around it instead of taking responsibility, right?
Exactly.
Or they own it, but they only take a small amount of responsibility, and he takes it all. He's just like, I should have told all of you. And I realized, like, not only was it a bad choice on my part, but I don't want you to make the same mistake as I did, you know, and let's all learn from this together because, and I feel that's also why everyone gets his back, because they're like, we've all been there as well. And this just happens, your moment just happens to be in the spotlight because you're our coach.
Yeah.
But it, again, doesn't seem like a big deal to the team. Like they don't feel as if he abandoned them or anything. And I think a lot of that has to do because of the last 2 years.
I was just going to say
what he's put into them.
Yeah.
That him walking off this one game, they don't feel like he's abandoned them because he's been there for them the whole time.
Yeah. And it probably doesn't feel like as big of a breach of trust either.
Yeah.
And, you know, so we've talked a lot on this show about psychological safety. And for 2 years, he has created psychological safety on that team, right? And he even says that, you know, I would never want you all not to be able to come to me about something, right? So he has built this for the last 2 years, which is the whole point of what we've been talking about around psychological safety, is that if you put in the work with your team to create those bonds, when you encounter a situation like this, where there is a breach of trust or where there's, you know, some other major thing that happens, the team is able to work through it together. It's not going to fall apart. And you're not going to have all this division or gossiping or, because it could be very easy that people would be like, oh yeah, we got you. And then in the back be like, can you believe what he just told us about? And there is none of that because they genuinely are like, you know what, we care, we support you, and that's it. And so this is the essence of that,
Yeah. And I think of like every episode, like every gesture he's done for every one of his players. I even think of, remember when he took the captain with Roy and the guy had him play again and learn
Isaac,
what it was like to be fun. Yeah. Is it Isaac? And Isaac realized how much fun football was all over again. But I think he probably has had that experience with each and every one of those players. So, and that's when you put in the work like that, then you don't have to worry about the one moment.
Exactly.
But so many leaders are so worried about the one moment and they haven't put in the work.
Exactly.
To actually build that safety.
Exactly. Yeah. Whew. All right, cool. All right. So let's talk about Roy and Keeley. So listeners, Jeff's got a huge grin on his face. Yeah, I just love them.
I love them. They're great.
Yeah. So good. So Roy's growth is incredible too, right? To see where he started and where he's at. And along the way, we get to see Jamie's growth as well.
I mean, with his iconic hat on.
I know.
With his icon hat on. Oh, my goodness. Did not expect that from Jamie Tart, right?
And then the corresponding reaction from Roy either.
Roy has come to confront Jamie. He goes, oi, Tart. And they go into the room and you're like, it's about to go down. Like he's about to mess him up. Like it's about to beat him up. This is going to be good.
Well, but even before that, Jamie's actually looking for Roy.
Oh, and James looking for Roy.
Right?
You're right.
He comes in,
You're
he's
right.
like, Roy around,
So they're both looking for each other. So they've already shown a certain level of growth. And then you're not even ready for Tart to be like, I apologize. I respect your relationship with Keeley. I respect your relationship with the team. I respect our relationship. I was like, who is this man? Who is this new Tart?
Yeah. And you know what's funny is like Keeley didn't say anything to Jamie. And so
Right.
this is the fact that Jamie was looking for Roy is showing that, again, like Jamie's growth and being like, oh, I really screwed this up. Like I should not have done what I did.
Right.
I'm going to come clean about it. And so the fact that he's like, because they've all seen each other since then, you know what I mean? But Roy just found out. And so, that scene, holy cow. And so Jamie's like, well, can I just say something first? And Roy's like, yeah,
right.
That's probably a good idea. Cause I'm going to, punch you in the mouth and you're probably going to need your teeth to do the speaking part. So like that whole back and forth.
That is so good. So that when finally he says Jamie apologizes, and then he's like, fuck. And he just walks away. They're like, oh my gosh, he just forgave him. And he forgave him in such the Roy way too, right? Like one word, and then he just walks out. But I will say this, because I feel like we may not get to this otherwise, but talk about Tart's growth on the pitch, because in the game to decide whether they get promoted or not, he gets fouled, he's going to the penalty box, and this is a Tart moment, right? Like this is when his father's like, this is where you need to be taking the shot. You haven't missed the penalty all season, right? Thierry Henry might be watching, like all these things. And then he gives it to Rojas. He gives it to Daddy Rojas, which again, and maybe this has been the theme the whole time, come full circle.
Exactly.
Come full circle, because first episode, Danny, well, he didn't miss the penalty. He made that penalty, but it got blocked by
the mascot. Yeah.
But yeah, the fact that Tart is willing to give up that spotlight and feels and is trusting his intuition, trusting his divine feminine at that point. His play to give it to Rojas is such a growth of him, but also such a growth of the team as well.
Mm-hmm. And it's also, to your full circle point, we see like Danny hasn't taken another penalty kick since that one.
Mm-hmm.
And that one really messed with his head for quite a while. And so we see that his work, like, it brings back the reminder of the impact that Dr. Sharon has had on the team as well, right?
Yep.
And so we see, like, on his shoes, it says "Rest in peace, Earl." And so, he's acknowledging the death part, but it's like the circle of life also, because now we have Macy Greyhound, the new mascot, and he looks at her and he's like, okay, football is life again. And he takes the shot, right? And so
what I also love about him saying football is life is even if he misses, he's like fully enjoying the moment. Like, this is life. This is what I wake up every day to do. This is why I love my life.
Yeah.
And he's like, let go of the results at that point, is just enjoying that moment. And that's when you do your best. That's when you do your best work, right? That's when you play your best. So I love that he's let go. Yeah,
he has let go. And it's just, he's back to kind of being that version of Danny that brought that energy, that good, wholesome, happy energy. I just want to say, as an aside, this whole mascot idol that Higgins was running was so cute. And I like that the dogs come from Barkingham Palace.
I know. And it's what, Macy Gray, and then who's the Macy Greyhound, and who's the other one?
Tina Fayhound. I just thought that was so cute.
And also the randomness of the owner hitting on Keeley. Just
and she takes it in stride, but she takes it in stride. She's just like, thank you,
And whoever that actress is, phenomenal. For the 30 seconds you were in that show, I want to find that actress and be like, you were so good that I remember you.
So now you've got like Keeley.
I've been watching your work, all of your work. And I'm like, oh.
It's a little bit of stalker vibe going on, but
a little bit. A huge. Hello.
Yeah, so you've got Keeley, who, we started to see that last week with the photo shoot for Vanity Fair. And now this this venture capitalist firm that has backed Banter wants to like back her in starting her own PR firm. Like, that's such a huge move for her, And I love that when she tells Roy, he's just so happy for her. And he's genuinely like, let's celebrate this. Let's celebrate you. Though I have to say, when he was swinging her around the kitchen, I kept thinking she's going to hit her head on that fridge.
I love that what you thought. I was like, wee.
Yeah, no, it was so sweet though. But then, like, right as they're about to celebrate, those Vanity Fair pictures come back and he's not in any of them.
Right. And he didn't want to be in them at first, which is funny.
Again, I love his reaction. Like, don't you dare, make any, like, you look so powerful. You look so, and he doesn't say beautiful. I think he says powerful.
Yeah, he does.
And I love that because, so often, like, that's the stuff women get complimented on, but she is powerful.
Yep.
And so I love that that's what he focuses on. And then when he comes into work, and has that conversation with the Diamond Dogs, which normally, like, he walks out of the room anytime the Diamond Dogs come together, and his way of asking to like be able to talk to them, also the whole roundabout, way of getting there. And everyone's like shock and delight at like, oh, well, Roy wants to do this. Okay.
Right. He gets a one-time pass, as Ted says.
Yeah.
But just that it was the way he asked was hilarious.
Yeah.
Well, no, how did he ask? I want to know. Do you remember how he asked? It's like, does anyone have anything they want to talk about? And he's just like, well, if I'd like to express things. And they're like, what? He's like whispering.
Yeah, he has something like, I have something I'd like to discuss. And I can't remember the exact wording, but I think he does say something about advice.
Yeah.
And so then Ted's like, do you want like the Diamond Dogs? Yeah.
They all get excited, but not too excited to tell anyone. But yeah.
Yeah. And so what I love about Roy is, he's done the work, he's growing, and he describes what happened, like these pictures came back. I don't normally like doing this stuff anyway. But it really hurt my feeling. And it's one feeling.
One feeling? Because usually has no feelings.
And it's such a moment of vulnerability to say that he was hurt, that it hurt him. It's not just that it hurt him, but it's bringing up these fears for him, right? Because what he saw when he looked at the pictures, yes, she looks powerful, all of that, but she looked natural. And that he, and his fear is that she looked good without me. Like, and he says it would be weird if I would have been in the pictures, but underlying all of that is his fear that like, she's not going to need him.
Yeah.
Right. Like she's going to move up. She's going to leave him behind. And that was the one thing that even when they were in the kitchen and she tells him about the PR thing, initially he's like all excited and everything. And then he says like, look at you, the boss. And then he said, you're not going to need me anymore.
Yeah.
And so, so you can see the wheels turning for him, like, oh, like she's going to move on without me. And so, which leads him to then like put this, like bring out this 6-week trip, for the two of them.
A grand gesture, right? Another grand gesture, a double downing. Yep.
Yeah. And it's interesting to see kind of their mindsets in that moment, right? Because she's just like, well, I can't go. Like, this is new and I have all this stuff to do, but you should go.
Yeah.
And he automatically jumps to, are we breaking up?
Yeah.
Because he's already been thinking about this for days, right?
Yeah.
Like, oh, she doesn't need me. She doesn't need me. She's not going to need me. And so in his mind, like the mindset that he's in that moment, and I think this is so common, right? Like in relationships where two people are in the same space and yet mentally they're in two very different spaces.
Yeah.
The difference here is like, I feel like they're actually talking about it and she's trying to be as clear as possible. Like, no, we're not breaking up. Like, we're going to be fine. I'm not sure he's convinced, but like,
I mean, yeah, right. So that's part of the, the cliffhanger for the last season, right? But I remember someone sharing this analogy once of like a relationship's like you being in a museum, and you're walking in the museum with your partner. And then at times they go ahead of you or you stay behind because you want to look at different parts of the museum. And some people just never come back together, right? And other people are okay with letting that person do whatever their thing and I'm going to do my thing. And then we will actually meet back up at a certain point. And that's kind of that like open, let's see what happens. I can tell she has a lot more faith in their relationship than he does. I don't think it's that he doesn't have faith so much in the relationship as much as he have faith in himself in this situation because he's never been in a situation like this.
And also just, we've talked about this before too, like kind of the lens through which we experience the world is through our own experiences. So you're right. Like he hasn't been in this particular situation before, but he's probably had other issues with relationships or seen other people's relationships or whatever. And so he's carrying that kind of baggage in with him as well. But definitely just a lot of insecurities coming up from him. And also his career, like kind of wound down. Like he's starting his second act as a coach now, but that's a lot less
glamorous, a lot less.
Yeah. Compared to what he was before. And now hers is just starting to take off now.
Yeah.
And so that's the other thing is like, they're kind of in different places in that way too. Right. And so how do you weather that? Again, just very real situations in relationships, right? People in different places with work, with other parts of life, whatever. And so how do you navigate that to still get through that together, You
also have to think about, too, that he doesn't have a lot of friends. Like I think of like my dad didn't have a lot of friends either. Like he spent most of his time with my mom. Right. And in his case, if you think of Roy's friends, he's got his yoga. He's got his yoga crew, which we have not seen. So I don't know how much time he has for his yoga crew.
Yeah.
He's got the Diamond Dogs, but he doesn't hang out with them outside of work. And then it's Keeley. So like 6 weeks by himself, like
Yeah, that I can't
I
imagine that.
mean, he likes isolation, but that's a lot of isolation. So
Yeah.
so who knows what epiphanies he's going to have while he's there.
Yeah. Now it's interesting because there was a lot of discussion about this in like the different Ted Lasso groups. And I remember I even kind of got into a bit of a thing with my sister when we were talking about this, because there's a lot of people who are like, what's wrong with Keeley? Like, why wouldn't she just like what? It's such a lovely
Really?
gesture. It's so like great of him to like, arrange that. And he thought about the Wi-Fi and like this and that so she could work. And I'm like,
Thought about the Wi-Fi.
I mean, it is a lovely gesture. And it's also
It's 6 weeks.
it's 6 weeks. And let's look at the motivation behind
Right.
why he's doing this, right? Like it's because of his insecurity of
Right.
and wanting to just like make sure like they're going to be together. And it's out of his motivations, out of fear.
Yes, it is.
And not like let's go celebrate. It's partly let's go celebrate, but like
6 weeks.
But he knows, right? And she says it's not. I'm not starting my job in 6 weeks. I already started it last week. So he knows that she even started this job already.
Yeah,
and he's still like, yeah. And so for me, like, yeah, it's a lovely gesture, and it's also a gesture of fear, and
yeah,
it puts her in a really crappy position to have to say no.
Yeah.
And I was really proud of her for like holding her boundaries around that, because it would be so easy to just be like, all right, like he's done this thing, let me just do this for him, and she didn't. She was like, no, like I can't do this right now.
And that's a good question to be asking ourselves whenever we're making decisions. Talk about choices, as Ted said earlier. Are you making a choice out of fear? Are you making a choice out of like abundance, right? Or out of joy? Like, how are you making this decision right now? What's driving this decision?
Mm-hmm.
Because I think if we look at it, like probably a significant amount of decisions are made out of fear.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what causes probably more fogginess and more, discomfort, because we're trying to protect ourselves, but then we just find ourselves even more and more scared with the next decision.
Exactly.
And maybe that kind of ties perfectly into Nate, because like all of his decisions have been made out of fear.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's move on to Nate.
Oh, Nate. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Where to even begin with this one? Yeah, we've already kind of started touching on things.
I find that you are much more understanding of Nate than I am.
Oh, I'm sure I'm in the minority. Like, I'm sure a lot of people are like, what is wrong with this woman for even saying this? So, yeah.
And also, I mean, I know this is a show and they've made him out to be a villain, and you got to have a villain, and he is a villain in many ways. And I like that you're challenging, because if we're talking about psychological safety and leadership, like you're right. There were a lot of ways in which, Ted might have failed, or Beard might have failed, or other people might have failed. I guess I'm just so angry because never takes responsibility for any of it.
Yeah.
He takes responsibility for all of the good things, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then he doesn't take responsibility for any of the bad things, like a entitled teenager.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the part that is like so frustrating to me. Yeah, during this process. So
yeah, for sure. And I don't want it to sound like I'm just giving him a pass. Like
yeah.
I think he definitely needed to take some accountability for sure. And I agree with you. He wants to take credit for all the good things and none of the other stuff that he's done. Right.
Yeah.
And so I agree. Like that is incredibly frustrating.
And maybe this is triggering me too, because all of last year, I went around the country speaking about dismantling toxic masculinity.
Mm-hmm.
And then I was just at the Society of Women Engineers conference talking about building resiliency and trying to address toxicity in the workplace. And there's so many Nate stories.
Yeah.
There's just so many. And it's always amazing, because every one of those stories, it sounds like it was all about that one person.
Mm-hmm.
There were so many other people that may have been able to address it, or many people tiptoed around that person, but that person just was able to just run amok. for so long, and rarely did they ever face any level of accountability.
Yeah.
In fact, in many places, they were rewarded for their bad behavior. So
Yeah.
maybe that's why I was so triggered by Nate's behavior, because it reminds me of like, this is why a lot of workplaces suck, because one toxic person just makes the culture, what is it? Yeah.
It poisons the culture.
It poisons the culture. Yeah. John Amaechi, I think, said this, where your culture is determined by the worst behavior tolerated.
Exactly.
You know, and it's just like, oh, man.
Yeah. Like I used to talk about that a lot in my former workplace. Is like, why do we cater to the lowest common denominator, right? Like all of our policies are built, they're punitive, right? They're built around punishing the bad behavior, right? Which is typically used to be the exception, not the norm, right? Like most people, I think we've talked about this too. Most people don't wake up in the morning, stretch and say like, I'm going to go out into the world and be mediocre, or I'm going to go out into the world and be a total jerk today.
Right.
Like most people wake up wanting to genuinely do a good job, right? And yet everything in our society and the cultures that we build are based in these systems of what do we need to do to like keep people in check, right?
Yep.
Instead of
and CYA, a lot of CYA.
Right. Instead of how do we work to like ensure that people are going to be their best selves, and that we focus on that, and then we deal with the bad behavior as it arises.
Yeah.
And I think that's the difference, right? Is like all of these work, like in the government, we used to have the saying, fuck up, move up, meaning like people don't know how to deal with the bad behavior. Leaders don't know how to deal with the bad behavior, or they don't want to.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so they will often like do whatever they have to get this person out of their hair.
Yeah.
And so, like, it's amazing to me how many times you call people for references and stuff, and they'll just be like, yeah, it's fine. It's fine. It's fine. And then this person gets on your team and you're like, what? Like, there's no way this was fine. Like, this is not new behavior. This is clearly like a pattern of behavior that nobody else wanted to deal with. And so
I think that each industry does the same, fuck up, move up. As well, because like look at the Catholic Church. Like if you can't think of something worse than that, and those people stayed, people stayed, you're breaking the law, on top of all these other so you're breaking many laws, religious laws as well as real laws, and they still are around. So it's just like, what are we doing?
Yeah.
Why are we not addressing these issues and letting this happen in every workplace?
Yeah. So that's my thing with Nate though, right? Is all these workplaces have hundreds of Nates, and it's the lack of challenging their behaviors at any point or helping to correct, because I don't think people start out as Nates. Nate didn't start out as Nate.
Nate did not start out as Nate.
Yeah. I mean, he had those underlying tendencies.
Yes.
And we've talked about those, right? The first time he meets Ted, he's yelling at them to get off the pitch.
Yes.
When he thinks he's been replaced, he calls Rebecca a shrew. So we've seen elements of that, but those are behaviors that can be corrected under the right mentorship or under the right leadership or whatever, right? But again, here, aside from Beard telling him once that we know of to do better, nothing else was really done to correct what as he continued building into the space. And again, I'm not blaming all of them. I'm just saying the Nates of the world don't just happen. They happen over time.
That is true. I think the challenge for me is I'm kind of like Beard, where I was like, it was never salvageable. The first time he spit at himself in the mirror, I was like, this dude is not good for this organization. He doesn't represent any of the values of this organization. He's the exact opposite of this organization and is directly trying to destroy it at every moment. Maybe even worse. I mean, definitely worse than even Rebecca. Why do you got to tear up the believe sign at the end, dude? Why do you just leave?
That made me
just
really
leave if you're gonna leave.
Yeah.
But all these gestures. So
sorry, there's one other thing that was just coming to mind based on what you said, though, is it'll come back. Yeah, it'll come back.
Because I want to get to the discussion between him and Ted when he goes on the venting rant. But even before then, like when Beard confronts him, what is your take on that? When he's just like, Beard is like, hello, Nate. And Beard knows that Nate knows that Nate knows that Beard knows, right?
But I wonder, like, do you think Nate understood that Beard knows?
Yeah.
You did?
Yeah. Yeah.
Hmm.
I mean, he knew that something happened and like he messed up.
Yeah. I don't know. I'm not 100% convinced. I think he might have wondered, but I don't know. I didn't necessarily feel like he knew 100% that like Beard knows what I did. I think he thinks he suspected it.
He suspected it, and he was just like, I just got to get out of the room. Yeah, like I gotta be out of the room as much as possible.
Yeah.
But yeah, just so I was just so frustrated because then later on, you know, Nate, we're doing Nate's false 9, right? And they call it Nate's false line, which gives him credit, dude. It gives this dude credit. Yeah, and it's not working in the first half. It's just not working at all. And then I found this to be so interesting. So they go into halftime and then they're like, well, what are we going to do? And Nate's like, I got to step up again and save the day. He has like that idea of let me step up and give suggestions, but he doesn't have a good suggestion. So then Ted's like, well, why don't we ask the team?
Well, hold on. Before you get there, I want to just go back to it didn't work in the first half. And what's interesting is that Nate is blaming the team.
Yes, Nate is blaming the team.
He's blaming the team that they're not, they can't do it.
Right.
But you hear the announcers talking about this late in the season, you should never introduce a new strategy, right?
Right.
And so there's like a disconnect there also about like, well, why did they decide to do this or whatever? And they decided as a group, like it was Nate's idea, but like they all agreed to it, whatever. But this blaming of the team. So to me, again, going back to what I think I talked about last time, this idea of our fight or flight reactions. When I see Nate blaming everybody else around him, he is in fight or flight, because when we are in fight mode, we're 100% in this space of blaming. And it could be blaming others, it could be blaming ourselves, but he's in this blame mode,
Oh, interesting. I also had to like look back up what false 9 is, right? And false 9 is a center forward who is stationed high up the pitch, but has the freedom to roam around and drop back into deeper positions to receive the ball and link up play. So that the false 9, that makes so much sense because that's how Jamie gets the penalty, because he's able to roam free. And he's probably blaming Jamie as well as probably blaming the midfielders for not sending a good ball in, because it's a really hard pass to actually do.
Yeah.
So.
And he keeps yelling like, hang back, right? Like, so, yeah.
Yeah. Interesting. And also, that's also another conservative way to play, because when you play false 9, it's much more defensive oriented, just like his park the bus strategy, which is decisions, in my opinion, made based off of fear. So they are also very reflective of how Nate plays his games. Okay, so then they go into halftime and then they ask the players, what do we think? And I just love the players' reaction. What was it? Jan Moss? What is the name?
Yeah.
Is that his name?
Jan Moss. Uh-huh.
And he's like, I think we can do it. I have faith that we can do it. And everyone else is like nodding. And then they start joking around. They start playing again. And the attunement with the team is so strong that I just loved it. And then Nate is so angry. Why is he so angry? They're still doing his play. Why do you think he was so angry? Because they weren't going to do something else? Like, I didn't understand his anger.
Well, so if you go back to when they were in the office, Ted is asking everyone, like, what do you think? What do you think? Well, so even before the game started, the match started, Ted had said, like, are we all set for the false 9 today?
Right.
Or is that what we're going to run? And Nate, who's been looking at the pyramid of success, turns around and says, you'd be fools not to.
I saw, yes.
Right?
Yes, I wrote that, yes. Oh, my God.
And so And even at that point, nobody says anything, right? So you can already see he's kind of like, he's in it now. Like
he's done.
He's
like
done.
This dude's done. Like he already quit before he quit.
Exactly. And so that happens. And then, so I think that just carries over into that halftime where now when Roy suggests speaking to the players, because I love Ted's comment about they look like a Renaissance painting portraying masculine melancholy.
And they did look like masculine melancholy. It was so beautiful.
Yeah.
And that was such a perfect moment because I'm stressed out about the game, but they're like making jokes.
I think so. So Nate is pissed that, first of all, he doesn't believe that the team can actually pull this off.
Yeah, because he has no faith in the team.
And now he's mad that they keep calling it Nate's false nine because he's convinced that it's so that they can blame him when it doesn't go well, right?
Which is such a warped perception of reality. But I just, that was just ridiculous. Yeah. So like if it was successful, he gets it. But if it's not successful, he doesn't get it. Like, I just don't. Yeah.
Right. And then when they go to do like the team chant or whatever, and Isaac kind of wades through the crowd and then touches the believe sign.
Oh, that was amazing. That might have been Ted Lasso's most proudest moment in that locker room.
And you see it on Ted's face. He has that feeling of pride. Like, okay, if I do nothing else and I leave this team today, like I've made an impact, right?
Yes, right.
Because that's what it is. And even the announcers say at the end of the game, you know, with something about believing, like that's what they attribute the win to. And all the players follow. And I was watching Nate's face during that time when they turned around, and so the players are all at the believe sign. They turn and look at the coaches. Yeah. And you see Nate, he can't even look at the team. He's so angry. And he's just shaking his head. And I'm sure if we got like a close enough look, he'd be rolling his eyes as well. But like it felt very rolly eyes.
So why do you think he was that way? What do you think was running through his head?
I think for him, like this is all very hokey. Like this game is about strategy.
Yep.
You guys aren't following the strategy. And now you're like talking about believe. And I don't know if anybody else has experienced this, but like, I know in my life, I've experienced this a couple of times where you get so angry about something and you're in such a deep hole of anger that you cannot see any other perspectives. And you cannot see that like, oh, well, maybe if I looked at it this way, it would be better, or it could change something or whatever. And when you get into that space, and that's where Nate's at, like, I think he cannot. So when they get out there in the second half and it's working and they're now scoring goals, you see Ted like head back over to him and just
like high five him a little. Tap him a little bit.
And Nate is just livid. Like, it doesn't matter to him that they're scoring goals and that they're, you know, like he's so angry at that point.
Yeah, it makes sense as to why he's so angry, because he's just looking for problems at this point. He just wants he wants them to actually lose now. He wants them to actually fail.
Well, but does he? Because he feels like if they do fail, he's going to be blamed for it. So I'm not sure that he wants them to fail.
But he isn't happy when they win. He was not happy when they win. Like, he only wants them to win is if he gets the credit.
Yeah.
If it's about him. So much of it has to be about him. And I think what makes him so angry when Roy's like, let's ask the team, it's not about him. Like, it's about the team. It's about the community. And he's just never understood that. He's just never has gotten. And maybe he never did. Even when he was like a kit guy, you know, he's like, get off my field, right? This is about, you know, you're like insulting me and you're assaulting my field when you're stepping on my field.
I don't think he said my field, though. I think he said get off the pitch. I don't think he said my pitch. Yeah.
But I'm just thinking like his maturity level is that in many ways it's very similar to Rupert.
Oh, for sure. 100%.
In the sense of like, he can't see past himself. And unless he's, you know, being celebrated, then it's just a waste of time. And when he sees them all touch the believe sign, Yeah, you're right. It's just like, this is another woo-woo thing, just like the dance-off we made for Dr. Sharon, just like the burning of the shoes, just or burning of the stuff, like all these gestures, and all these gestures are dumb. And if it was my team, I would run it like a military tribunal.
All right, so let's talk about Nate and Ted.
So they win the game. They win the game.
Well, before they win the game, right? So their conversation happens as the team leaves. Ted notices Nate storms out the other direction and goes into his office.
Yeah, right.
So Ted follows him. And I thought that this was actually a really great conversation. First of all, Nick Mohammed, I mean, I thought he did a fantastic job as an actor, like to really pull out that the hurt that he felt, and and his anger and all of that. But I love what Ted says, right? So he says, like, what's going on? Nothing. I know you're mad at me, so just tell me what I did.
Yeah, you're mad as hell, and I just want to know why.
And then he says, what do I need to learn here? And that, like, oh my gosh, like I think back to like times in my own leadership, like if I would have just said those words, like, what do I need to learn here? Like, that's so powerful, right? Like he's acknowledging, like, all right, clearly something happened. What do I need to learn? And then we hear Nate, finally say, like, you made me feel like I was the most important person in the whole world. And then you abandoned me. Like you switched off a light. I worked my ass off to get your attention back, to prove myself to you, to make you like me again. But the more I did, the less you cared. It was like I was fucking invisible. You haven't even got and he says, like, the photo that he gave him for Christmas in your office, right? But we know that that's actually in Ted's house, like next to the picture of his son. So it's in like even a more, and so like there's like so many assumptions being made here, right? And then he says, you're calling it the Nate's false nine, so you can blame me when the team fucks up, which they will. Everybody loves you, the great Ted Lasso, but I think you're a fucking joke. Without me, you wouldn't have won a single match, and they would have shipped your ass back to Kansas where you belong with your son, because you sure as hell don't belong here. And then he says, but I do. I belong here. This didn't just fall into my lap. I earned this. And Ted says, I know you did. And then he says, if I didn't tell you how important you are to me, I'm sorry. And then, by then it's too late, because Nate just, like, he can't even sense like the sincerity anymore, right?
Yeah.
What really struck me, like, this is the second or third time I've watched it now, and I think because of all the other stuff we've been talking about, what really came through for me this time is the one thing that Ted said to Sharon in his, after his panic attack during the funeral, before the funeral, was that after his dad died, he made it a point to make sure that he always knew how everyone else around him was doing. And he made a point of letting them know that he cared, right? And the abandonment issues were so big for Ted, because we hear him say that to Sharon, right? Like, my dad abandoned me, my wife abandoned me, or I can't remember now, but like, you of all people know how I feel about being abandoned. And now Nate's telling him, you did that to me. And it's the one thing that Ted never wanted to do to anybody. And so, like, that's even like a bigger kind of knife to the heart to me. Like, he just pointed out, and again, this could be a lot of Nate's own perception because of his insecurities and whatever, but it's where they're at, and it's what he felt, and it's now to the point where he can't see anything else because he's just so angry about it.
Yeah. Oh, I was so angry at Nate, because when he says, you made me feel like the most important person in the world, and then you abandoned me. First of all, whoa, why are you putting all that on this person? Listen, just because you have issues with your dad, right? And you have issues that you have not addressed, and that you've been getting all your validation through tweets and posts and telling yourself you're the wonderkin. And now not having any level of understanding that, like, Ted has a team to run, right? Ted is going through all these other things, and that now you're putting this on him, that it's his fault. I was like, yo, dude, that is beyond unfair. That's how I felt. I was just like, you're putting this all on this dude, that this dude is supposed to be your therapist. And Dr. Sharon's right there. Like, you could have gone to Dr. Sharon if you wanted to figure some of this stuff out. Like, take some responsibility for anything, any of this. I also was like, why is Nate's hair gray? I need to understand why it's gray. And what is it? The gray hair is supposedly a symbol of Nate's downfall and feeling of abandonment, and how these feelings have stressed and aged them. And some of the writers even said they do this as a way of showing the growth or lack of growth of someone, right? So I'm like, dude.
And the ways that bitterness, guilt, shame, and stress can change a person's appearance.
Right. And it's like,
we'll link to that. I found Nick Muhammad actually had tweeted this really great thing. It lays out a lot of different parts of that lead up to this moment.
But I was just so frustrated that he put so much of his energy towards Ted. And it was almost like he was screaming at Ted when frankly he should be like screaming at his dad, right? Or other, like, there are other people in this, but
it was definitely displaced anger for sure.
It was so much. And yes, Ted has a certain amount of responsibility, but to have to carry all that, it was just like, this dude is here to destroy the organization. And
100.
I was just so frustrated that even when they won, right? Even then when they won, he was still, not happy.
Excuse me. When they won, it just went to show that Ted's way of doing this works. And and he didn't want any part of that, you know?
Yeah. But don't tear up the believe sign as you're leaving.
Yeah.
Come on, man.
Like I agree. This was not 100% Ted's fault. And, you know, I think a lot of what Nate said was out of line. But again, it's his experience of what happened. It's his view of what happened.
His experience. I guess I'm just frustrated because, again, I'm going back to, like, you know, having to work in these organizations and address this toxicity, or help people address this toxicity in their workplaces. And it's so much centered around the toxic person. It's so much centered around, like, adapting to this person. And I remember once talking to a friend of mine who was interviewing for a job, and she had to interview with one of the C-suite executives. And they were like, hey, be careful, you know, as you're interviewing with this person, and don't mention this part. But, you know, right now he's under investigation for sexual harassment allegations. So it's just like, what is this guy still doing here? But they were, again, tiptoeing around it and being like, don't offend this guy. And, you know, in this case, it's just like, it's so much about him rather than being like, it's about the team, you know, and it should always be about the team.
But, you know, earlier in the day, so when you go back to Roy's confession, the other part of it was he said, you know, oh, and on top of everything, you know, Jamie told me that at the funeral, he told Keeley that he loved her. And everyone's like, and he's still alive, you know, and then that's when Nate finally confesses, but he confesses to kissing Keeley, right?
Yes.
And even though he's kissed Keeley, Roy's like, you know, it's okay. You made a mistake. Don't worry about it. And that's exactly what Keeley had said. Don't worry about it, right? And so it's just like hit home even further for Nate, like that he's not a threat at all, right? Like, and so Jamie has a history with Keeley. Jamie told her he loved her, and Jamie and Roy have a history of their own, right?
Right.
Whereas Nate, like Nate's way of trying to show his dominance and power is to like assault Keeley, basically, right? Like, like he just grabs her and kisses her. I shouldn't say it that way because it it was without consent.
It was without consent. Yeah, it was definitely without consent.
You know, that was his power move, right? Like, and also just like not understanding how to read a situation. But
Roy sees him like a child,
exactly.
like a teenager, again, like a teenager that's just like, oh, you know, you don't know what you're doing, but we're okay. We're gonna forgive you because you're a kid.
Yeah,
and that's how he's acting.
Right. But so if you think about it, it was that situation with Keeley, and that's the assumption we're making, that led him to out Ted in the first place. And so now hearing those same words, don't worry about it, coming from Roy, I think pushes him over the edge once again to where he's just done. And he's like, okay, you know what? Like,
Yeah.
I'm just looking at like the thing that Nick Mohammed put together. He says a lot of the key beats in Nate's season 2 journey are unheard, unseen, or dialogue free, but they were all scripted, including the spitting. And then he says, and we've talked about this, Nate spits both, and he's both physically and metaphorically spitting at himself. Deep down, I think / hope he hates what he's becoming. Though whether he'll be truly redeemed, I genuinely don't know.
Interesting. So going back to the Roy thing for just a moment, when Roy's just like, yeah, it's no big deal. You can also see that Nate's like, no, I want you to be angry at me because I'm angry at me, right? I want you to spit in my face the way I spit in my face.
But also, if you're angry at me, it means that I matter.
Yes.
Right? Like, you dismissing this and saying, don't worry about it, it means I don't matter.
Yes. And that's the worst.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, we've talked about this. The core of positive psychology is other people matter. Right?
Yeah.
And so, and I think anyone who has felt invisible or unseen and not felt like you mattered in a situation, it's the worst.
Yeah.
And so imagine like a lifetime of this, starting with your own family or like your father, right?
True.
Making you feel that way. And then in every scenario, like that's already the story you're telling yourself, because that's what was built into your neural pathways as a child, is you don't really matter. And so now you view the world that way. And because you view the world that way, that's how you see them viewing you. Right. And so.
But then it's kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy too.
It 100% is.
He does all these things to then continue to feel that way, from even rushing to the tweets when he's the Wonderkin rather than, connecting with the Diamond Dogs and talking about that. He runs to things that actually don't matter as his validation.
And then a couple other things he talked about. He said the opening and closing shots of season 2 are the same. So it's the close up on Nate's face. But he says in the final shot, the light in Nate's eyes has supposedly gone out. And then the only scene that's just between Ted and Nate in season 2 is in episode 12. The last scene for the two of them before this was when Ted apologized for snapping at Nate in season 1, just before he delivered the roast.
Wow. And the preview picture of season 3 is them standing right in front of each other.
Yeah.
When he's now on West Ham. So I wasn't surprised that he was, joined West Ham. Like, it kind of like, you kind of got the vibe that was going to happen. But what you're saying is in the first episode of season 2, it's his face.
Yeah. So when we open season 2, that very first scene is his face on the pitch. Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, because now his hair is completely.
And they did that in season 1 as well. So in season 1, the opening shot was on Rebecca's face and the closing shot was on her face.
Wow. I wonder if it's going to be Ted's face for the last season.
We'll find out.
But yeah, it wasn't surprising. That part wasn't like, oh my gosh. And maybe probably because I kind of like it was pretty obvious to put that together. But what I also found so fascinating about the scene was the amount of screaming that was happening on the pitch. So as they were running their drills, like,
oh yeah,
it seemed like a joyless place, huge stadium, very posh, but like just straight military.
100%.
And then you have Rupert walking by like the puppeteer. Mm-hmm. And whispering something to Nate, and then Nate just walking up to that camera, and you're like, what is now? Your hair is even more. Now you look like one of those coaches that you loathe.
Yeah.
And his like, not only do I feel like his soul has disappeared, but it's been replaced by like this new persona.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's going to be interesting to see what that looks like in season 3. What came up for me in watching that closing scene, though, was like the full transformation, right? So being dressed in all black. So that was part of it, was the black suit, that he switches over when he buys when he's out with Keeley, is the black suit. And that's part of the switch over of the persona too, right? Is now he's in all black. He's kind of got that tougher demeanor. But watching the players on the field, like going to that Star Wars theme, I felt like stormtroopers, right? Like stormtrooper training, because they're all dressed in white.
Yep.
You've got him all dressed in black.
There's no personality to any of them. Like you can't tell the difference. Well, you can tell the difference with all of
the Richmond
AFC
players
Richmond.
all have their
Right. They're all looking different. Yep.
Yeah. So yeah, it was, I thought it was really powerful, but for the listener, we did find out, I think just this week or last week, that the new season's coming out on March 15th, which is pretty soon. So that's really exciting. We won't have to wait long. We were just talking about this earlier, that the difference for this season for us will be that we're both going into this having not watched it. So that's going to be really interesting to see what we each come up with. Yeah, I'm really excited. Like this was a big episode. I know we've probably missed other parts in there that we didn't talk about, but we've talked for a
while. We've covered a lot.
Yeah, this is an extra long episode.
I loved it. I love this. Is one of my favorite conversations yet.
Yeah. So, so listeners, thank you so much for listening to season 2. I've heard from a lot of people who have really enjoyed the discussions this season. I feel like we've had some really good ones, and a lot of the information is captured in the show notes. So please feel free to go back and find that stuff. And I think Jeff and I are both really excited about getting into season 3. We're going to do our best to keep it as close to the actual timeline of the show this time, but we'll see how that goes. And so Jeff, thank you so much. This has been so much fun this season, and I'm really looking forward to the next one, but I really do appreciate you.
I appreciate you too. And thank you, listeners. And please share this amazing episode of What Would Ted Lasso Do? We'll talk to you later.
Thanks so much, everyone. Take care. Thanks so much for listening to another episode of What Would Ted Lasso Do? If you got any nuggets of Ted Lasso wisdom from this episode, try them out in your life and let us know what happens at WWTLD Podcast on Instagram or on our website, www.tldpodcast.com, where you'll also find a full transcript of the show. We love hearing what other Ted heads took away from the episode, or details or perspectives that we might have missed.
And if you do like the show, please subscribe and head on over to Apple Podcasts and leave us a 5-star rating. Every rating helps us get our show in front of more listeners. To that end, we'd also ask, if you enjoy the show, please share it with your friends, loved ones, randos on the street. You get it.
Thank you to the team at Podify for producing our show, to Kajal Dabalia for all our visuals and graphics, and to Kenzie Slato for our theme song. And most of all, thank you to all of you for listening.
Ted Lasso could simply just be another show to binge watch, or if we challenge ourselves to consistently ask the question, what would Ted Lasso do? It could change the trajectory of your life. It has for us.
So join us again next time as we explore another episode and ask ourselves, what would Ted Lasso do?